Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said, "What are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is better for you to have one man die for the people than to have a whole nation destroyed." Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and elders had gathered, but Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they may put him to death, but they found none. Though many false witnesses came forward, at last 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him, and someone slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?" Then Jesus cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last.
For the record, please say your name.
Caiaphas, high priest.
Now, you were the first to declare that he needed to die.
You say that as if it was personal. It wasn't. It was necessary. One man dies or the whole nation suffers. That's leadership. That's responsibility. I didn't kill him. I protected Israel.
Or you protected your position.
How dare you?
Caiaphas, Judge Wesley will see you now. He's in his chambers deliberating.
Joseph Bar Caiaphas, high priest of Israel, appointed by Rome, serving at the pleasure of the empire, suspect number 1 in the murder, serving at the pleasure of the empire. I've been sitting with this case for 3 days now, and I keep coming back to that because there is something profoundly telling about a man of God whose tenure depends on the approval of Caesar. Something that tells you before you even open the file about who this man is and who he's had to become to keep what he has. But let's look at what we know. The night in question, Jerusalem, Passover, the city is swollen with pilgrims, tensions are high. The religious establishment is nervous, but they've been nervous for a while now because this man from Nazareth has been turning the world upside down, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and in the mind of Caiaphas, worst of all, drawing crowds, enormous crowds, uncontrollable crowds, theologically inconvenient crowds. And then there's the matter of Lazarus, a man dead for 4 days. Walks out of a tomb in public with witnesses. And whatever slim hopes Caiaphas had of containing this situation about this Jesus evaporates in that moment, because you can argue with a teaching. You may argue with a rumor, but you can't explain away a man who was dead and is now standing in front of you asking for something to eat. So, according to witness testimony, they convene. Caiaphas, the high priest, the chief priest, the Pharisees, and the conversation that they have is fascinating, not because of its cruelty, but because of its transparency. According to the witness, they do not ask if Jesus is guilty of anything. They ask, what are we going to do about Jesus? This question is not about judgment. This question is not about justice. This question is about management. Caiaphas, callous, practical, clear-eyed, unsentimental Caiaphas cuts through all of the tension with one sentence. According to the witness testimony, he says, it is better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish. Suspect number one in the murder of Jesus. But you need means, motive, and opportunity. What were Caiaphas's means? What resources did this man have at his disposal to successfully commit the murder of Jesus? It's the first question, but it's answered by his title. He's the high priest. No one else has that level of institutional authority. The office of high priest in first century Judaism is not simply a religious title. It was the most powerful institutional position available to a Jewish man living under Roman occupation. He presided over the Sanhedrin, council of 71 Jewish elders, and the chief priests and the scribes, and that group focused as the supreme religious and judicial authority of Jewish life. They ruled on matters of the Torah's interpretation. They ruled on matters of religious law, and they ruled on matters of community dispute. In another era, if Israel was free, it would be the highest court in the land. But this is not free Israel. Israel was conquered by Rome, but Rome allowed for this religious institution to remain in place under Roman supervision. And be clear, Rome didn't conquer nations and leave their institutions intact out of some sense of generosity. It was strategy. The most efficient way to manage and occupy people was to work through their already existing power structures. So keep the temple running. Keep their religious calendar intact. Let them have their holy days. Find the people who already had authority and make them useful. As long as order is maintained and taxes are collected, Rome is largely content to let these Jewish people govern themselves, which means the Sanhedrin, this council, still has real authority. They still have real reach. They still have real institutional muscle. And Caiaphas, according to the file, sits on top of that muscle. but he also has the temple guard. It's an organized armed force whose job it was to maintain order in and around the temple. Not Roman soldiers, Jewish officers. Which is why when Jesus is arrested in the garden, it's the temple guard that comes for him, not the Roman soldiers. Caiaphas didn't need Rome for that because Caiaphas had his own apparatus of enforcement. He has the means. What keeps pulling at me, what I think is the most dangerous thing, is not the Sanhedrin, this legal council. It's not the temple guard, these armed Jewish officers meant to use force to make Caiaphas's whims a reality. Maybe the most dangerous of all the means at his disposal was legitimacy. Because Caiaphas wore robes that the people recognized as holy. He spoke with a voice that people were conditioned to trust. He operated within an institution that carried centuries of sacred weight. And that means he could do what no other Roman soldier could do. He could make an execution look like justice. He could take a political assassination and dress it in the language of God. He could take a murder and make it look righteous. And he could frame his own verdict as a verdict from heaven. And that's the most dangerous kind of power. Not a power that presents itself in swords and shields, but a power that comes wrapped in religious regalia and scripture. He had the means. What about the motive? I mean, it would be easy and probably lazy to conclude that Caiaphas hated Jesus and wanted him dead. He even said in his own deposition it wasn't personal. If it was personal, that'd be a clean story, but clean stories never stand up under scrutiny. And this evidence is way more complicated than that. Because Caiaphas was not a free man operating in a free nation making free choices. Caiaphas is a man trying to maintain religious authority inside a colonial system that could revoke his authority at any time. The Roman governor of the area is a man named Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate had the authority and the power to appoint and remove the high priest. Caiaphas' predecessor had been removed from office because Rome didn't like him. Caiaphas' own father-in-law was removed as high priest. Caiaphas has held this office for almost 2 decades, longer than anybody else in recent memory, which tells you something about his own political agenda and influence. It tells you he had learned how to manage his relationship with Rome. Here's what stays with me. It's hard for me to get past this. The vestments of the high priest, the religious robes that the high priest would wear on the Day of Atonement, which was the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, was kept under Roman lock and key. The Romans held the high priest's religious garments and took them back after the high priest would use them in festivals. The most sacred objects in Jewish worship were kept under Roman imperial guard. The empire owned worship. Caiaphas had to ask permission to wear his priestly garments. That's the world this man lived in. That's the arrangement he had made peace with. So when the witness on record, John, tells us that the chief priests and Pharisees are gathered and they're afraid, and they say if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe him and the Romans will come and take away our temple and our nation. This fear deserves to be heard accurately. It's not irrational. It's not manufactured. They had seen what Rome had done to movements they perceived as threats. They had seen the Romans line the streets of Jerusalem with crucifixions. Their fear was real. But the fear does not explain what happens next, because what happens next is not defense. It is not the reluctant decision of a man with no options. It is calculation. He says it's better for one man to die. This is not the sentence of a man in anguish. This is the sentence of a man who's already decided what to do. A man who feels no wrestling in it, no grief, only the cold calculation of a man who's been doing this kind of math for a long time. One man for the nation, simple. And in this equation, what is the nation really? Is it the people of Israel, the widows, the poor, the orphan, the marginalized, those in need, the very people Jesus had been healing and feeding? Or is it the institution, the temple establishment, the arrangement with Rome that protected his own interests, protected his own office, the vestments that were kept in a box? I think Caiaphas told himself it was the people because that's what he had to tell himself. He needed to believe that. But the evidence suggests he's actually protecting something smaller and more personal. He was willing to kill Jesus to protect his position, his access, his relevance, his carefully maintained seat at the table that wasn't even his. That's his motive, not hatred, ambition, and the willingness to let somebody else pay for his ambition. The opportunity is what troubles me the most. If you person of the law, is where the tension runs the deepest, because according to the witnesses, what happened in Matthew 26 is not a trial. It has the appearance of a trial. It has witnesses, it has a testimony, it has a verdict, but a trial, by definition, is a proceeding designed to discover the truth. What Caiaphas does is something entirely different. What Caiaphas does is a proceeding designed to produce a predetermined outcome with enough procedural cover to make it look defensible. This is not a trial. This is religious political theater. Under Jewish law, capital cases were required to be heard during the day, not at night. But according to the witness on record, the arrest happens at night in a garden under cover of darkness. And they bring Jesus not to a courtroom, but to Caiaphas' house, where a tribunal is already waiting in the middle of the night. That alone should have ended this proceeding before it started. Capital cases were required to be held in the Hall of Hewn Stones, which was a designed chamber of the Sanhedrin within the temple complex, not at the high priest's house. Location mattered under the law. It's not a technicality, it's a safeguard. And according to their law, verdicts in capital punishment cases could not be rendered on the same day of the trial. There was a mandatory waiting period, time for deliberation. Supposed to have time for consideration, time for mercy to speak before a sentence was carried out that cost somebody their life. But there was no waiting period here. And then witnesses. Matthew says on record that they were looking for false testimony and couldn't find any that would hold up. Witnesses kept coming forward and their accounts kept contradicting each other. Under Jewish law, testimony that could not be corroborated was inadmissible. The proceeding should have stopped right there. But Caiaphas never stopped. According to the record, he leans forward and asks Jesus directly, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" Jesus answers him, and Caiaphas tears his robes. The tearing of robes is a traditional gesture at the horror of blasphemy. But in this moment, it's not horror. It's a theatrical punctuation. Caiaphas performs outrage for the room, because performing outrage gives the council permission to feel what he needs them to feel so that they'll do what he wants them to do. It was a show. He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? That's what he said on record. No further need of witnesses? After a nighttime tribunal in the wrong location, after every procedural safeguard of his own law had been set aside, after none of the witnesses held up, and here's the evidence that I find most striking. After all of that, after the arrest, after the illegal trial, the manufactured charge, the torn robes, the verdict, Caiaphas still couldn't execute Jesus. Under Roman occupation, the Sanhedrin had no authority to carry out a capital sentence. That power belonged to Rome, which means everything Caiaphas did that night, everything, every law he broke, every safeguard he dismantled, every principle he violated led him to a place where he still had to walk Jesus across town and hand him over to Pilate, the man he'd spent his entire career trying to appease. He broke his own law, violated his own conscience, compromised his own sacred office, and still had to ask Rome for permission. That is not the behavior of a powerful man protecting his people. That's the behavior of a man who discovers in the moment of his greatest transgression that the power he sacrificed everything for wasn't even his. That was his opportunity. That nighttime trial he created. I've presided over a lot of cases, complicated cases, ugly cases, cases where evidence was clean and the verdict wasn't, cases where good people did horrible things, cases where horrible people did things that weren't necessarily wrong on paper. I know how to take a file and hold it at arm's length. I know how to separate the evidence from what I feel, but for some reason, this case won't let me do that. It's not the brutality of the murder of Jesus. I've seen brutality before. Crucifixion is common. It's not even the betrayal that Jesus endures, even though I keep coming back to that. There are two things about this particular case, these particular defendants, and I can't resolve two things. First thing I can't resolve is that the longer I sit with this file, the more familiar these defendants become. Not historically, not academically, but familiar in the way a mirror is familiar. Because there's something in Caiaphas. Maybe it's how calculated he is. Maybe it's in his willingness to let someone else absorb the cost of his ambition. Maybe it's the way he dressed up self-interest in the language of the sacred. There's something about it that I've seen before, and not in a textbook. Sometimes I've seen it in myself. Sometimes I've seen it in other people I know. Sometimes I've seen it in rooms I've sat in or tables I've sat at. Now, there is a name for an institutional version of this. It's Christian nationalism. And to be precise about the charge, it's not about Christians who love their country. It's a deliberate fusion of Christian identity with political power, where faith is merely a costume worn by the empire. And when the church becomes an instrument of the state's agenda. It's when religion is loaned to political power for the sake of religion getting a seat at the political table. Because Caiaphas had a seat at the table too. And it cost Jesus his life. And whenever the church drapes itself in a flag and calls it a cross, whenever religious leaders offer their endorsements to policies that crush the poor, criminalize the immigrant, and silence the marginalized, it's nothing but Caiaphas in a different robe. The system is still a weapon. And religion is still using borrowed legitimacy to make its institution survive while crushing people. But it would be easy if it was only the institution. Because, yeah, I've seen it institutionally, but most people will never lead a denomination or stand in a rose garden with a corrupt president. Most people are just trying to make it through the week. I'm just trying to make ends meet, just trying to come up. But in trying to come up, and trying to make it through the week, and trying to make ends meet, a whole lot of people have been in a room where somebody needed them to speak up. But they did the math and realized speaking up might cost them something, so they stayed quiet. trying to make it through the week, you've watched people get passed over, get pushed out, get pushed down, and said nothing. Not because people don't see it, but because seeing something and saying something are two different things when your own position is on the line. And it's easy to make peace with somebody else's expendability when your own name and position and paycheck is on the line. That's the Caiaphas impulse. The human tendency to protect what we built, what we think we earned, what we're afraid of losing, even when protecting it requires us to look away from somebody else's harm. Caiaphas' ambition is not why he's on trial. Caiaphas' ambition is not a sin. But ambition without a conscience is a weapon. Wanting to make it is different than being willing to do anything to make it. And this file shows us what happens when a man of God picks up that weapon. But I said there are two things keeping me from staying distant. I've only named one. The first thing is the familiarity of the defendants. But the second thing is that there's something about this victim. In law, there's a concept called a precedent. Precedent is the idea that what's decided in one courtroom reaches forward to every courtroom that comes after it. Cases don't stay in the past, they travel. And the reason this case has been traveling for over 2,000 years, and the reason it landed on my desk is not only because of what Caiaphas did, it's because of what the victim said. In every case I've ever known, the victim is the most legible person in the room. They're the one who the things were done to. The victim is the one with no agency in what happens, and that's what makes them a victim. But this victim is different. The victim in this case is named Jesus. And before Caiaphas said anything in that midnight meeting, before that garden arrest, before that farce of a trial, testimony says that Jesus, the victim in the case, said out of his own mouth, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. The victim said, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord, and I have authority to lay it down and authority to pick it up again. The victim said, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. All before Caiaphas ever opened his mouth. Which brings me to the one statement I can't get past. The thing that Caiaphas said, it's better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish. Caiaphas meant it as some cold political calculation, the math of a man who's learned to treat people like variables. Kill one, keep power. But one of the witnesses on record, John, says in verse 51 something extraordinary. He says that Caiaphas didn't say it on his own, but that as the high priest that year, by saying this, he prophesied. He prophesied. Which means the question before this court is no longer simply whether Caiaphas is guilty of the murder of Jesus. The question is something far more unsettling. Was Caiaphas the architect of this murder, or was he merely an instrument in a plan that was already in motion before he called that meeting? Did Caiaphas murder Jesus, or did Jesus knowingly, willfully, and with some type of divine authority walk straight into Caiaphas' house that was masquerading as a courtroom and let it happen? And if Jesus let it happen, if he willingly walked into that man's house knowing what was coming, that does not make Caiaphas innocent. It means something even stranger. It means that Jesus looked at the ambition, the calculation, a frightened man protecting his position, and somehow, without excusing or sanitizing it, Jesus moved through it. Jesus used it. Caiaphas' sin is still sin. His harm was still harm. His actions were still wrong. But can Jesus be a victim if somehow in the hands of Jesus, even the worst of what we do doesn't get the last word? Somehow Jesus finds a way to move through the worst that we do. Caiaphas' ambition to sacrifice people on the altar of self-preservation, Jesus moved through it. The institution that wrapped itself in holiness while serving the empire, Jesus moved through it. Even when good people were silent because they calculated the cost of speaking up and decided it was too high, Jesus moved through it. The midnight trial, the manufactured charges, the borrowed legitimacy, Jesus moved through it, not around it, not despite it, through it. Like Caiaphas' behavior wasn't a dead end, it was an open door. Sin was still the sin, harm was still harmful, the wrong was still wrong, but somehow, what Caiaphas and those religious leaders meant to be Jesus' grave only became his passageway to purpose. And I don't know what to do with that yet. I'm not ready to render my verdict. There's more to consider and more defendants to examine. But the only thing I know for sure is that there is something about this Jesus.